An example of the reward that is guaranteed to the righteous Muslim in the grave is that his grave is expanded approximately 105 feet by 105 feet, and his grave is illuminated with a light similar to the light of the full moon, and the fragrance of paradise would be present in the grave. The sincere intention means for the Muslim to do the good deed, seeking the acceptance of Allah only, and not the praise of the people. So alhamdulillah that we are guided to al-Islam. We are grateful to Allah that we are guided to al-Islam. Because with al-Islam, the individual human in this life, he can survive and he can overcome and he can make it. And he can live a life of dignity, a life of honor, a clean life, a pure life, while being patient with the difficulties of life. Because this life is not perfect for anyone. This life is not the final destination. So always there will be difficulties in this world, but the Muslim, he looks forward to paradise. And we are thankful and grateful to Allah for giving us access to the knowledge of Ahlus Sunnati wal Jama'ah, the saved group. So we're grateful for that. Because with the knowledge of Ahlus Sunnah, the human being, if he follows it, he implements it, he'll make it to paradise. So we're going to continue talking about the sins of the heart. We're almost finished with that section. We reached to where the author said, denying predestination. So among the sins of the heart is to deny predestination, which means to deny that everything is willed by Allah. And this is a very easy concept to understand. It means that Allah Ta'ala made everything in this world the way He knew that everything in this world would be. So Allah knew that when you exist, like you as a person, when you come into this life, when you exist in this life, what your decisions are going to be. And the choices that you're going to make. So Allah willed for you to do what He knew you were going to do. Because nothing escapes the knowledge of Allah. So everything that exists in this universe, it exists according to the will of Allah, according to His eternal and everlasting knowledge. And before we were even created, before our souls were even created, Allah Ta'ala willed for something called the upper pen to write in something called the guarded tablet everything that would occur in this universe, or everything that would occur in this world until the end of the world. What happens from Judgment Day forward is not written on the guarded tablet, but of course Allah knows all of it. So everything in this world will be whatever Allah willed to be. So it's a sin of the heart if someone denies that. They would blaspheme, of course, because they would be saying that something other than Allah willed for such and such thing to occur. And by saying that, they're associating partners with Allah. And they're saying also that His will was not done. And so that, of course, takes the person out of Islam. And since that occurs in the heart, yani that denial, it stems from a creed in the heart. That's why it's counted as a sin of the heart. Uh, the next one mentioned here is among the sins of the heart is being happy about a sin committed by oneself or others. So that's something that many Muslims. Oh, we have a question here. Would this be the same as denying qadar? Yes. Predestination is one of the ways in English to refer to qadar, predestination. Yani Allah Ta'ala made everything the way that He knew it was going to be. So being happy about a sin committed by oneself or others, this itself is a sin of the heart because it occurs in the heart. That liking, that being happy, that being pleased with the sin, it occurs in the heart. So the Muslim who feels happy about a sin, any sin, that would itself be a sin. But of course, if the Muslim uh, feels happy about blasphemy, then that would be blasphemy. So to be pleased or happy with blasphemy is blasphemy. To be pleased or happy with a sin that is less than blasphemy would be a sin. So the person has to be careful because what do we see on TV? We see sin. Or what do they show on TV? They show sins. And when a person is watching that, they have to guard their heart because if they don't guard their heart, they might feel happy by the sin that they're watching, and then they would commit a sin. So that's something for the person to be careful when they are consuming content on the internet. You see someone post on Facebook and they're holding up a drink, they're holding up alcohol, and they have a caption like, "Yeah, I'm celebrating my birthday." So that's two sins right there: drinking alcohol and celebrating the birthday. So someone hits like on that, they're essentially liking a sin. So definitely do not hit like on any of those posts. And that's just an example. If you're watching a movie, for example, and they're committing a sin on screen, you have to hate it in your heart so that you can be free from that sin. And of course, also think about inkarul munkar, which is objecting to or any rejecting the forbidden matter. If you can change it with your hand, you're obligated to change it with your hand. If not, then you're obligated to change it with your tongue. If not, then you're obligated to uh, hate it in your heart, reject it in your heart. So what is the case of the one who he can fast forward, he can skip it, and he doesn't? So, and even if the person commits, they themselves commit a sin, if they, let's say, committed riba, or they, whatever sin that they did, less than blasphemy, they have to hate it in their heart as well. They have to hate that sin that they themselves did. They can't be pleased with it. They can't be happy with it. Among the sins of the heart is betraying someone, even a non-Muslim, such as promising them safety and then killing them. So we're not allowed to betray. So an example that they give here is you tell someone, yeah, come into my house, you'll be safe, and that's the understanding. You're welcome here. And then the moment that they come inside and you close the door, you attack them and kill them. So this is forbidden to do even to the non-Muslim. So that's one example. Another example of betrayal is, let's say, a Muslim, they told you, hey, I need to keep this gold here with you, these gold coins. I have 100 gold coins, and I'm going on a trip, and I have nowhere safe to put it, and I keep it with you until I get back. If the Muslim that is being proposed to keep it, if they know of themselves that they won't be responsible enough, that they would be able to fulfill that responsibility of keeping that money safe until the person gets back, then it would be forbidden for him to accept. If he is confident that he can fulfill the responsibility, then it's sunnah for him to accept. So if he accepts and then that person leaves on his trip and he comes back from his trip and then he says, hey, I'm back. I came to pick up the gold. And that person says, what gold? They say, you didn't give me any gold. Get out of here. Get out of my house. So this is betrayal because he accepted the trust and then he denied it. And he basically told them, I don't have your gold. So that's an example of betrayal. Another example of betrayal is, for example, if a person comes to you and they say, look, my daughter, this guy proposed to her. I don't know him, but maybe I thought you might know him. Like, what do you think? What do you know about him? Or, should I accept the proposal and then see how it goes? Or like, give me some advice. And so the person that is being asked for the advice, if they know that that person, for example, uh, would not be beneficial for that girl, because they say they don't pray. They know about that person that that person doesn't pray. But because what did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what did he say? What's the criteria for accepting a marriage proposal? He said, if you're pleased with his deen and his manners. So the deen is first. So if he knows about him, he doesn't pray, but that person, he tells him, he would tell him, I wouldn't. My advice to you is don't accept the proposal. My advice to you is say no. So this would be correct. That would be what he's obligated to do. But if instead of telling him the truth and telling him say no, he says, yeah, there's a great guy, you know, go ahead with it. Yeah, go ahead. So now this is a betrayal. And there's other examples, but I think with those examples, it is clear. The next one is, among the sins of the heart is inflicting harm through deceit. Inflicting harm through deceit. So basically harming another Muslim in a concealed way. Harming a Muslim in a concealed way. Making the harm reach a Muslim in a way that he doesn't detect that it's coming from that person. So this takes, of course, different forms, but subhanallah, ma'al asaf, unfortunately, this is something that happens in some communities where the person would have something against another person, and he does certain things to harm them, but like in a secret way, in a concealed way. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Al-makru wal-khida'u fin-nar." And this means the one who harms a Muslim deceptively did something that deserves for that person to be tortured in hellfire. Yani meaning it's an enormous sin. Because of course, harming the Muslim, it is something uh, that in itself is sinful. Subhanallah. And it is definitely a disease of the heart. There's no need to unjustly harm anyone. If someone did something unjust to you, it doesn't make sense to do something unjust to them. So in the case where someone did something unjust to you, you can get justice. We're not saying that you have to, in all cases, just sit there and let injustice happen to you. No. It means if you want to be patient, you can be patient and you get reward, and on judgment day, you will get uh you will get your rights on judgment day, or you can seek justice in this world. You can also do that, but never cross the line and do injustice yourself. Among the sins of the heart is hating the Prophet's companions, the Muslim relatives or wives of the Prophet, or hating the righteous Muslims. So among the sins of the heart is hating the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they are the Muslims who met the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his lifetime while being Muslims, whether or not their time as companions was long and they died as Muslims. So if a Muslim met the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam during his lifetime, while they were Muslim, they met him at the same time as being Muslim, and then that person, their life ended as Muslims, then they're considered a companion, a sahabi. Even if there was some apostasy between the time that they met the Prophet as a Muslim and between the time that they died. Because some companions, they met the Prophet while being Muslim, and then after that they committed apostasy, but then after that they came back to Islam and they died as Muslims. These people are considered companions. And what they narrate from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is taken as evidence. So the one who hates all the companions commits blasphemy, because it is as if he has denied the credibility of Islam. However, if the Muslim he hates some of the companions, that itself is not blasphemy. As for the Muslim relatives or the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it is forbidden to, is a sin of the heart to hate any of them. As for the pious Muslims, um, it is forbidden to hate them because they are the righteous Muslims. They're better than Muslims that are not righteous. As for hating some individual Muslims who are enormous sinners, this is not forbidden. So if there is a Muslim who's an enormous sinner, to hate him in the heart, that itself is not forbidden. But of course, it would be forbidden to do injustice to them. Also, among the sins of the heart is miserliness with regard to what Allah made obligatory, parsimony, and greedy avarice. So basically, this means the first one, miserliness with regard to what Allah made obligatory. Like the one who does not want to pay the due zakah that they're obligated to pay, or the one who doesn't want to pay the obligatory support for his wife and his prepubescent children, or the one who doesn't want to pay to support his poor Muslim parents, or the one that doesn't want to help his relative while his relative is in need and he's able to help. And similar to that is a stronger level of miserliness, uh, which is it's like miserliness, but it's stronger, and it's to a more severe level. So it is parsimony, not parsimony. It's a mispronunciation on my part. So it's parsimony, which is a more severe type of it's a more severe type of miserliness. So let's give an example. So for example, let's say he was obligated to pay some zakah and he didn't pay, like let's say a part of it. He kept some of it, but he paid, like let's say, most of it. This is miserliness. But not paying any of the zakat that they owe, and not supporting the obligatory financial support, and not keeping the ties of kinship, etc., or not supporting the poor Muslim parents. All of that together, that would be like even more. The person would be even more miserly. He would be committing the sin of parsimony. And the greedy avarice, it means to have the severe attachment to accumulating wealth in a dispraised manner to reach or to get to a situation to be able to be supposedly superior to other people and to show off, and only spending the money in fulfilling the desires of the nafs. So that whole thing is the definition of greedy avarice, meaning they just want money any way that they can get it, even if it's in the haram way, so that they can live luxuriously, so that they can buy expensive things, so that they can look down on people, so that they can show off, so that they can think that they're greater, and so that they can fill their belly and fulfill whatever desire that they want. Having um, that ambition or that want to having that ambition and that desire to get money like that for those reasons, that's called greedy avarice. It's a sin of the heart. And many of the wealthy people, that's how they are. Uh, Many of the entertainers and celebrities, that's how they are. And that's a sin of the heart. The next is to neglect the required respect for what Allah glorified. So among the sins of the heart is to neglect the proper respect for what Allah Ta'ala glorified. And sometimes, and some examples of that are blasphemous. So like if the person degrades paradise and he says paradise is a children's toy, like they're trying to say paradise is nothing. So they blaspheme for that because they're not having the proper respect for what Allah glorified. And whatever doesn't reach to the level of degrading, then it would just be a sin. Also, like if a person degrades the the threat of Allah, the threat of punishment, if they say, "Oh, hellfire is nothing, it's easy," then they blaspheme also. Another example of a blasphemous disrespect of something that Allah Ta'ala um, judged that it is a serious matter is like some people, they say hellfire is a hospital. They claim that hellfire is like a place where people, they get cured or they become well. This is blasphemy as well, because hellfire is a place of punishment and torture. It's not it's not a place where you get a remedy, where you get fixed, where you get cleaned. And the people who say that hellfire is a hospital, a'udhu billah, which is blasphemy. These are the followers of a person named Amin Shaykh, and their leader after him was a person named Abdul Hadi Albani, the Damascene. He was from Damascus. Uh, so he said a lot of blasphemy. Among that is that he claimed that you cannot say that Allah tortures the evildoers, and that's obviously blasphemy, because it's revealed in Al Quran that Allah Ta'ala is Shadidul Iqab, which means that Allah Ta'ala, that his punishment is severe. So they pervert those verses of the Quran. They say a lot of weird things. So here we want to give a note about something important benefit. It is not permissible, and it would be blasphemy if the person understands what they're saying. It is not permissible to say about, and the statement itself is blasphemy. It's not permissible for a person to say about a sin, whether it's an enormous sin or a small sin, no problem, or it's okay, or no problem. Like if somebody says about an enormous sin or a small sin that it's no problem, in Arabic they say ma'alesh, this would be blasphemy. So whoever says that about a sin and they know that that's a sin, they say about something that they know is a sin that it's no problem, then they have contradicted Islam and they would be an apostate. As for if someone says that about a small sin and he understands from it that it's not an enormous sin, and he doesn't understand from it saying that doing the sin is good, then that person doesn't blaspheme. Now, among the sins of the heart is to belittle uh, the Quran. This is blasphemy as well. If someone belittles the Quran, or someone belittles any of the Islamic knowledge, or someone belittles paradise or the torture of hell, and we've mentioned some of those examples about paradise and hell. Now, among the examples of belittling the Quran is like one misguided person. His name is Al-Hallaj. He was a person who claimed to be a Sufi, but he was really a wicked person and a blasphemer. He claimed that he was writing something that would rival the Quran, which is blasphemy. As he was trying to say that he's writing something that is like the Quran. So that's an example of belittling the Quran. Subhanallah. May Allah protect us. Tayyib, and now by that we've finished the sins of the heart. Are there any questions about that before moving on? طيب, we'll continue on. Okay, there's a question here. Uh, yeah. So, the statement itself, linguistically, it would be blasphemous. Because saying about a sin that's no problem, that's obviously contradictory to Islam. But if there's a specific scenario where a person says about a small sin, ma'alesh, which basically means no problem, but they think that that means that they're saying it's not an enormous sin. They know they're not saying that the small sin is no problem. They're saying, oh, it's not an enormous sin, meaning like as if they're saying they're just uh pointing out it's not an enormous sin. In that case, they wouldn't blaspheme. So, but generally, if a person they say about something that they know to be a sin, no problem, they blaspheme. Is that clear? No. The author moves on to the section about Amin Wafik. The author moves on to the section about the sins of the abdomen. And the abdomen is the first part of the body that begins to decompose in the grave. So it is very important for the Muslim to be careful about what he puts inside of his belly. And it's not just through eating, obviously. This list that we're going to go through, the sins of the abdomen, certain things here are counted as sins of the abdomen, even though uh, it was not literally consumed through the mouth and it didn't literally go into the stomach. But whatever the human being consumes, and it would be counted as a sin of the abdomen. So the author said to consume the acquisitions of riba, taxes, the money of others taken from them by force, stolen money, or anything acquired through a transaction that is prohibited in Islamic law. So if someone works in riba, for example, they lend someone $1,000 with the condition that they pay them back $2,000. So this is called riba al-qard, interest. So the person he works, that's his job, and he does that as a job, and that's the money that he makes from that is what he uses to buy his food, is what he uses to buy his clothes, what he uses to put gas in his car, is what he uses to buy shoes, what he uses to, for his house, to pay the rent, to pay the light bill, to put the sheets on the bed, whatever, his furniture. So he's consuming those he's consuming those things, and he's using the couch, he's sitting on it, he's wearing the clothes, he's eating the food, he's living in that house. So all that would be counted as sins of the abdomen. Same thing with taxes. Yani, if the person, his job is to take the money from people because they bought something or because they sold something, and they use that money to buy their food and buy their clothes, etc. This is haram as well. And also in the case where you get a tax return and you're not a poor Muslim, and that money is mixed together in a way that you can't isolate. You're not going to be able to separate your money from the money that was taken from you. You can't separate your money from the money that was taken from everybody else. And there's no way that you can find out who each owner is so that you can give them back the money. because all that money that's taken from taxes is taken unjustly, Islamically. Because those people, they don't accept. I would say most people don't accept for their money to be taken by the government by force, because basically they force it. They don't just say, "Oh, you can pay if you want to pay." No, if you don't pay, guess what's going to happen? They'll send the agents right to your door. They know where you live. They know, what you post on social media. They can find you. And if they find you and they prosecute you, you're most likely not going to stand a chance, especially if you don't have a lot of money. Also, the money of others taken from them by force, like you like walking up to someone and snatching their purse and running away to use that money to buy their food, to buy their clothes. This is a sin of the abdomen. Stolen money means like the money was taken from somebody else unjustly, but in like a secret way. It says here, yeah, the people who have money, they're not considered to be a poor Muslim. Like in the chapter of Zakah, we talked about there's the different categories, the 8 categories of people that can receive the Zakah. And the first two that we mentioned are the faqir and the miskin, the impoverished Muslim and the poor Muslim. So if someone's considered one of those two, they can use that money that they get from the tax return, because since that money is considered to be lost money, one of the ways that it can be used is if it's used for the welfare, the general benefit of the Muslim nation. And one of those welfares, one of those benefits is for the poor Muslim to get what he needs. So the poor Muslim himself, he can use it. Um, so someone is not a poor Muslim, and for example, that let's say money that they gathered, they gave that same money to the person, and they said, "Here's your tax return." Then that person, that Muslim, if they're not poor, they can't use it themselves. They have to find a poor Muslim. Uh, so also it's a sin of the abdomen to consume anything acquired through a transaction that is prohibited in Islamic law. So if a person, they do any type of buying or selling or renting that is forbidden in the Islamic law, to consume that money would be sinful. To and to use that money for clothes and groceries and things like that. Now, I want to give some detail about that. So here's a beneficial information. So this is something that the scholars said in the books of the Islamic law. They said if a person, if an individual, he took something from another individual in a permissible way. So let's say uh, I bought something from someone in a permissible way. And that thing that I bought from the person, my assumption, or and it the apparent, as far as I know, right? There's no like clues or anything that makes me doubt. It's just the apparent, as far as I know, the face value, the surface of the situation is that it's a halal thing. And so I'm buying, let's say, an item. I'm buying a cell phone from another Muslim. The apparent is that it's a halal cell phone. Yani that it's not stolen. It's not, for example, like something like that. It's in the box, it's in the package, it looks brand new. The person sells cell phones, so there's nothing for me to think that this person, let's say, stole a bunch of cell phones and now is selling them to me. So the scholars, they said, if a person takes from another person something in a valid, in a permissible way, and their belief about it and their assumption about it and the surface situation about it is that it's halal, but in reality it's haram. uh if the person that he took it from, if his apparent situation is goodness, then that person who bought that haram thing, on Judgment Day, he won't be accountable. So, hey, let me give a specific example. If someone, they had a haram item, let's say a cell phone that, for example, wasn't theirs. It's a cell phone. It's in the package. It's not theirs. So in reality, and it's haram for that person to sell it to me. But I don't know that. I don't know this person that he's selling something that's not his. And the apparent situation is from my interaction with the person or from what I know about the person, that this person is good. And I don't know him to be a criminal or a cheat or a fraud or a scammer. And I'm just buying the cell phone. And the person said, this is the price. And I said, okay, I'm going to buy it for this price. And the apparent situation to me is that it's all good. It's halal. So I pay the money, I get the phone. And in reality, that person get supposedly sold me a phone that it was haram for him to sell. It's not his. So in reality, it's haram for me to have it because it didn't really come into my possession. But I don't know about it. This is something that I have no idea about. So in this case, I won't be held accountable on Judgment Day for having that haram phone. So I hope that that example was clear because we're going to give another example. Okay, so the next example, if a person buys food and the things that they buy the food with is, let's say, I'm just gonna say, uh, not to pay right away, right? So you go to the grocery store, the person that runs the grocery store. This is something that in many countries people do. It's normal. You go to a grocery store, you get, for example, your bread, you get the milk, you get the cheese, you get whatever you want, and then when you go to the person that to check out, he writes it down, and then so it's like a tab, and then at the end of the month, you come and you tell him, hey, what's in the books, and he'll tell you, for example, $200. So then you just pay the 200 for everything that you've taken so far up until that point, and for that month. Right? This is something normal in many countries that this is done like that. So if that's the case, so he buys the food, right? He does the contract, but he doesn't pay right away. He's gonna pay later. But then when later comes, he pays with haram. He pays with something haram. So if the seller had given him the uh the merchandise with his acceptance, yani while he was accepting of that, before paying the money, then it's halal for him to consume it. And it's halal for him to consume that food. Or the seller gives him the food after paying with the haram money, while he knows that it's haram, then he is allowed to eat the food as well. Otherwise, it would be forbidden for him to consume it until he tells um, the buyer, for example, I gave you haram money, I gave it to you from a haram money, let me have the food anyways. Or instead of that haram money, he gives him halal money. So in that case, it would be forbidden for him to consume it until he tells him, uh, actually, I gave you haram money, let me have the food. Let me just have the, you know, except for me to have the food. Or instead of giving them the haram money, he says, here, take this money instead. Before he does those two things, he won't be able to eat the food. It would be forbidden for him to consume it. So let me know if that example was clear before moving on to the next example. So the first case, yeah. So for the first case, the person, he bought the food, but he didn't pay right away. So he bought the food. He bought, let's say, a loaf of bread. He bought a loaf of bread. So now he owes the buyer. Okay, so he said, I now buy this bread from you for $5. So now he owes the buyer $5. But then the person, he just walks out with the bread and he goes on with his life. He lives his life. He eats the bread. Then let's say a week later, now he's gonna pay the seller. He's gonna pay the seller now for the bread. So if he pays with $5 that are haram, since in this case the seller already did the contract for the bread and he let him walk out with the bread, and then later he said you can pay me later. Since that's the case, the person who's paying with the haram $5, it would be permissible for him to consume the bread because he didn't buy it specifically with those $5 haram. He didn't specifically say, I now buy this bread from you for these $5, which happened to be haram. He just said, I now buy this bread from you for $5. And then the seller, he said, I now accept. The person got his bread and went home and ate it. And then a week later, now he's coming to pay what he owes for the bread. And he happened to bring in, let's say, $5 that were haram, and to pay with $5 that were haram. So that's haram, obviously. But he's allowed, the person who got the bread, and he would not have committed a sin by eating the bread. Is that one? That's the first one. Is that one clear? Okay. So the second one is the person, he uh we'll stick with the bread, and we'll stay with the same scenario of the bread. So when he bought the bread, the seller, so he said, I now buy this bread from you for $5. So, and the seller said, I now accept. So the seller took the bread and handed it to him. He gave him the bread in his hand. Now the buyer, now he's going to give the $5 to the seller. And the seller knows that those $5 are haram. So in that case, also the buyer, he would not be sinful for eating the bread because he got it. He got it in his hand before he paid. So it's similar to the first case where he got the bread and he didn't pay right away, and then he came back later and paid. This one's similar, except that it's a shorter amount of time. But he got the bread first, and he didn't say, I now buy this bread from you for these specific $5 that are haram. He just said, I now buy this bread from you for $5. So what does the person do? He reaches in his pocket. He's gonna pull out. He's got, let's say, a bunch of bills. He's got 10, let's say, $5 bills. He's gonna pick one, right? So when he made the contract, he didn't specify which exact one. He just said $5. So it could be any $5. The person that's standing next to you could be like, here, take $5. And he pays it with that $5. But so the contract was already done. He already has the bread. And then when he goes, the buyer, when he goes in his pocket to pull out the money, he picks one of the $5 that's haram. And then he pays the seller with that haram $5. And the seller knows that those $5 are haram. In that case, the buyer, he is allowed to eat the bread, and he won't be sinful for eating the bread. Is that second case clear too? Okay, so if it's not those two cases, if neither of those two cases happen, so for example, if he says to him, um, I now buy from you this bread for these $5, and the seller, he doesn't know that those $5 are haram, and the buyer, he gives him those haram $5 before he gets the bread. So he puts the money first, and then the guy gives him the bread, and the seller, he doesn't know that those $5 are haram. In this case, the buyer, it's forbidden for him to consume the bread until he tells him, this, for example, this money that I gave you is haram money. Can I still eat the bread? Can I still have the bread? If the person says yes, then he can eat the bread. If the person says no, then he has to pay him with halal money before he can eat the bread. And that's basically it. I hope that that's clear. Yeah, of course the seller would be sinful for that. But we're talking about consuming the bread. And so the seller would be sinful for taking those haram $5, absolutely. And the buyer would be sinful for giving him five haram dollars, absolutely. The focus point is about the bread. So they did commit a sin, but now we're talking about when he eats the bread. Is he sinful too when he eats it? When he eats the bread? So it breaks down according to those scenarios that we gave. We can go into this, inshallah, more. There's more examples to be given. And that's very important because and it's a lot of haram money out there nowadays. But definitely, so one way to avoid that is as a seller, you make the contract and you don't specify which, the exact money that's going to be used. You just say any, let's say $5. And you don't specify those specific ones that you're holding in your hand. You just say, and I sell this to you for $5 American. That would any avoid a lot of things. But if there are no further questions, we'll conclude. وفيكم. طيب نهلل لا إله إلا الله اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات. بارك الله فيكم. السلام عليكم.